Like, you can talk about victimization as much as you want to, and I think that that's fair, because I think there are a lot of things that make me furious about your experience and the experience of PhD programs in general. And at the top of the list is, if a student fails a test, whose fault is it?
Students.
Incorrect.
Was it PI or professor?
Absolutely. Right? There's one person in that relationship who has knowledge and one person who doesn't. It is the responsibility of the teacher to help the student along. The responsibility of a PI is, if your experiment isn't fucking working for a year, like, how the fuck do you expect a first-year PhD student to figure out why their experiment isn't working? Like, that's the job of a PI. Like, if your experiments don't work for a year and you're doing what your PI is doing, why on earth are you accepting responsibility? You're a first-year grad student. He's the guy who's running the lab. Like, if he's telling you to change 5 variables and it doesn't work out, like, whose fault is that?
I want to say him, but I also feel like it's me for actually doing the 5-variable experiment and not saying no. But
yeah, so I understand where you're coming from, but this is where you have to admit that, like, you have to acknowledge that there's a power dynamic, right? Did you tell your PI that you think you guys should do 1 variable at a time?
Yes.
And what did he say?
No.
So what are you, like, what are your options then?
You kind of don't have any, I guess.
Exactly. So I think you did what you were supposed to do. You raised your concerns with your PI, and your PI is young and dumb and a product of his academic environment. And so he decided to abuse you in the same way that he was abused. The cycle of abuse continues.
Mm-hmm.
That's like PhD programs in academia, even medicine is like that. It's like these surgeons are like, all these medical students cry when I call them a piece of shit. Like, what the hell is wrong with them? Like, it's like, yeah. And they're like, but I got called a piece of shit. And it's like, yeah, but you don't have to call other people a piece of shit. You can be nicer to them. Just because you were abused doesn't mean that you need to abuse others. So, I mean, do I think that you were victimized by your circumstances? Absolutely. But, like, I don't think, in a sense, I don't think that kind of matters. Like, it pisses me off. And, you know, when I work with students, I try to take the response. Like, I've learned that, like, if they don't learn, that's, like, my fault. Right? And did I really do the best job that I can? I mean, they're not to say that I'm completely responsible, because if I, like, try and they, like, go home and don't study and don't do anything that I told them to do, like, then I put the blame on them. But as a teacher, you know, if you're doing what your PI is telling you to do and the experiments are not working out, then it's not your fault. Unless you're being negligent. Like, so if you're being negligent in some way and, like, half-assing the experiments, then it is your fault. But that's why I asked you, did you run it the same way as the previous person? Did your results turn out the same? And the answer to that question is yes, which means that it sounds like you did a good job because you got the same results. A couple of other interesting things there. I'm going to go off on a quick tangent. But, you know, the other thing there is that 70% of, like, studies are, like, not reproducible. So I think that's a big issue.
Shit.
And the last thing that I just want to toss your way is, like, do you know how people win a Nobel Prize in science?
No, actually.
So they actually start with a failed experiment. Not all, most Nobel Prizes, at least that I've studied. So I've studied 15 or 16 Nobel Prize winning experiments in biology or medicine. And all of them start with a failed experiment. What do you think about that? Why does someone get a Nobel Prize?
Because they made a huge discovery.
How do you make a huge discovery?
A lot of luck.
Sure. But what makes a discovery huge? What does it mean to be a huge discovery?
Either it has a big impact on the world or on the field.
Okay, but a huge discovery and big impact are synonymous.
Yeah.
Right? So what makes something a big impact?
Changes everything. It
changes what?
Something.
Not everything. What does it change?
What people thought?
Absolutely. So think about this for a second. In order to change the way that people think, you have to start with a failed experiment. And what I mean by a failed experiment is the people who won Nobel Prizes, they did an experiment and their results were not what they expected. And this is what separates 99% of scientists from 1% of scientists. Instead of looking at it as a failure, they looked at it as an opportunity. I'm expecting this result. And in the process of figuring out why I did not get the result I expected, I'm discovering something huge that changes the way that we look at science. Do you get that? Like the biggest travesty here is that your PI lost an opportunity to win a Nobel Prize. What you don't understand is that you don't have a year of failed experiments. You have a year of data that suggests that something about the world is not the way that we have conceived. And if you guys spent the time and energy to figure out what that is, that's how you win a Nobel Prize. Why did you guys fail? Why is it that all of your expectations, think about this, Nobel Prizes come when all of our expectations are wrong. When we have 1,000 expectations for a particular result, and that result does not happen, and then we discover why, then it changes our 1,000 expectations before. That is a big impact. Mm-hmm. So the crazy thing here is that all you see is a failed experiment. I don't even see failed experiments. I see data. I see a wonderful opportunity to like understand something about how the variables like result in like compounds in a new and different way. It's exactly why you got into a PhD program for the first place. And I think it's a travesty that you were in a situation, call it luck or call it idiocy of your PI or whatever. I mean, I'm being judgmental. I mean, maybe the guy's brilliant and compassionate and we're just getting a biased view. It's very possible. But like, I don't conceive what you did as a failure at all. I think, are you a failure? Sure, you can accept that. But deep down, I really don't think so. Right? I think that in a sense, you are a victim of your circumstances. I think you did the experiments that you were supposed to do. I think the only real mistake you've made here is that you've got a big ego and you have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other things, like this is the other thing is when you're smart, like you're going to rise until you equilibrate, right? Like if I take an object of a certain density and I put it into a fluid of a certain density, what is the object going to do?
Either sink or float.
Depending on?
The density of both of them in relation to each other.
Exactly. So if I have a gradient of densities, a gradient of liquids of different densities, they're going to equilibrate. And then if I put an object of a different density, where is it going to end up?
Whichever one is equal to its density.
Exactly. So welcome to academia, my friend. So where you rise, you got accepted to the PhD program because you were hot shit in undergrad. Mm-hmm. And you're going to equilibrate to like where you normally belong. And so the higher up you go, like the more average you become. Like everyone thinks it's such hot shit that Dr. K is from Harvard. Like at Harvard, I am subpar. I'm really like, no one even knows who I am. And like, I worked with people like, you guys think I'm brilliant? You guys have no fucking idea. I'm really not that smart. I think I'm really one of y'all. I don't think I'm really any different from you guys. And you guys are so confused by that. And it's like, I don't think you guys have been at Harvard. It's like, you guys want to see smart people, you should go there. And I mean, I met people that just blew my mind with just how much knowledge they were able to absorb and hold in their head. I was like, holy shit. And so the one thing to understand is that the better you do, the more you're going to feel, in a sense, like a failure until you abandon this whole complex, right? Because you're going to keep rising and then you're not going to be, I've always been able to get things faster than everyone else. That thought is the problem. Like, if I had to diagnose one thing that I could surgically remove from your brain, it is that thought. There's comparison in there. There's ego in there. There's an expectation of ease in there. Right? There's so many things there that are just, like, so wrong. Their potential. Like, that's the other thing. Potential is such a curse. Such a curse. It's such a burden. Because you can't win with potential. Either you meet expectations in which no one is surprised, or you're below expectations, in which everyone is disappointed.
Yeah.
It's like average or failure. Like when you sign up for potential, you sign up to be average at best or meet expectations, get a C, a D, or an F. Can't get an A if you have very high potential. You just can't, maybe you can win a Nobel Prize. That's the only thing that would be impressive to anyone.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it that I hadn't thought about before. You're signing up for average.
Yep.
At best.
at best. Now, I don't really know. I kind of got on my soapbox. So I'm going to just pause for a second. By the way, do you know anything about IRB applications?
No.
Okay. I'm looking for someone to do IRB stuff.
IRB.
Yeah, Institutional Review Board. So we're trying to study HealthyGamer. So we're doing like research, and we're looking for researchers. I just wondering.
Oh.
So let's just kind of go back to a couple things. So first of all right. So any thoughts or questions so far, Zach?
Nothing comes to mind now.
Okay. So we've got two options. One is you can tell us the rest of the story because you actually haven't told us everything yet. Which I would love to hear if you're emotionally up for it. And the second question is like, I think there's a question of like, what do we do? Right? Or I guess the other question that I would ask you is like, how can I help you? Or how can myself and Twitch chat, how can we help you? And so what do you think? Should we tell the rest of the story? Let's ask Twitch chat. Can you see chat?
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Okay, good. It's good that you
That
are
was
reading
a
it,
full
but I'm gonna tell us what does Twitch chat want to do? Do we want to hear the story, or do we want to get to figuring out how to help you? What does chat say?
It seemed to be pretty split from what I can tell.
Yeah, see, this is what I fucking hate about Twitch chat. Like, I always ask them for things, and it's like they don't help me.
Both white people happy.
Yeah, like both, like they're never satisfied. You think having a PI is bad? These guys, they're never satisfied. They want everything all the time.